On my first week at Apex Manufacturing, I walked into the warehouse expecting ordinary chaos. Machines buzzing, workers hauling pallets, managers barking orders through the din. Instead, I noticed something that made my stomach twist. Electrical wires snaked across wet concrete floors like deadly snakes, sparking faintly whenever forklifts rolled past. Heavy equipment leaned against concrete walls without proper brackets or support beams. Emergency exits were stacked floor to ceiling with cardboard boxes, almost like someone had deliberately barricaded them. I stopped mid-step, watching a wire throw sparks near a puddle. This wasn't just messy or disorganized, this was dangerous. My safety training from college flashed through my mind: exposed electrical near water, blocked fire exits, unstable equipment. Every rule was being broken simultaneously. My supervisor Nick walked past, clipboard in hand, completely ignoring the chaos around him. Other workers stepped carefully around the hazards like they were part of the landscape. I wondered if I was overreacting, being too cautious as the new hire. Then I overheard something in the break room that changed everything. In the cramped break room, two older workers sat hunched over coffee cups, talking in hushed, nervous tones. The first man, probably in his 50s with graying hair, described nearly getting crushed when a forklift tipped against an unsupported wall last month. His voice shook as he recounted jumping backward just as 2 tons of machinery crashed where he'd been standing. The second worker, younger but with tired eyes, laughed nervously while recalling sparks jumping from a grinding machine directly onto fuel barrels. "Thought the whole place would blow," he whispered, glancing around like the walls had ears. Management said it was no big deal, just routine sparks. I pretended to read messages on my phone while listening. Their voices carried the weight of fear disguised as casual workplace stories. These weren't rare accidents or one-time incidents. They were close calls, stacking up like dominoes, each one bringing the warehouse closer to a catastrophe that would make headlines. The fear in their voices told me everything. I realized silence here wasn't just cowardice or workplace politics, it was survival. Over the next few days, I started documenting what I saw. My hands shook as I angled my phone, pretending to text while capturing exposed wiring, tilting pallets, and those blocked emergency exits. Every photo felt like committing a crime, as if invisible eyes were watching from every corner of the warehouse. I wasn't an investigator or some undercover reporter. I was just a 24-year-old recent graduate with a shaky grip on courage and an even shakier paycheck. But walking past those hazards every day, seeing coworkers navigate around death traps like they were normal obstacles, made me feel responsible. During lunch breaks, I'd slip into quiet corners and snap pictures of frayed cables dangling near metal surfaces, fuel containers sitting inches from electrical panels, and safety equipment locked away in cabinets that nobody had keys for. Each click of my camera felt like a small act of rebellion. Someone had to care about these workers' lives. Someone had to speak up before the inevitable happened. I thought I was being careful and discreet. Apparently, I wasn't as invisible as I hoped. One Thursday afternoon, my manager called me into his office. The small room smelled of stale coffee and cheap cologne, with Venetian blinds half closed like a courtroom about to pass judgment. Motivational posters hung crooked on the walls, their irony not lost on me given the circumstances. His smirk hit me first, that confident expression of someone who held all the cards. Then I saw what he clutched in his thick fingers. My phone. My heart dropped into my stomach like a stone thrown into deep water. Manager Troy Vincent leaned back in his squeaky chair, my phone screen glowing as he scrolled through my photo gallery. Each swipe felt like a slap across my face. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting harsh shadows across his satisfied expression. "Interesting hobby you've got here," he said, not looking up from the screen. His voice carried that dangerous calm that preceded workplace storms. 2 supervisors flanked his desk, their arms crossed, watching me like I was a criminal caught red-handed. With one deliberate swipe, he began erasing weeks of my secret documentation. Troy leaned back triumphantly, deleting photo after photo while supervisors Jake Morrison and Bill Patterson looked on with approval. The sound of each deletion felt like a nail being hammered into my coffin. "Rookies don't get to rewrite the rules around here," he sneered, his voice dripping with condescension. He held up my phone, showing the empty gallery to his audience like a trophy. Look at this. Our newest employee thinks she knows better than 15 years of management experience. The supervisors chuckled on cue. Caring about a few scratches and loose wires? What's next? Wanting us to bubble wrap the whole warehouse? My cheeks burned with humiliation. I wanted to shout, to defend myself, to explain that those weren't minor issues but serious safety violations. Instead, I sat there in silence, biting the inside of my cheek until I tasted blood. I refused to give him the tears or breakdown he was clearly expecting. My silence became my shield, protecting what dignity I had left. But inside, something else was building. Not defeat, but determination. What he didn't know was that I wasn't as naive as he assumed. 3 hours before Troy summoned me to his office, I had uploaded every single photo to my personal cloud storage. 27 images of safety violations, each one time-stamped and GPS tagged, safely stored where his grubby fingers couldn't reach them. I wasn't the helpless rookie he imagined. Growing up with tech-savvy older brothers had taught me to always back up important files. When I started documenting the hazards, my first instinct was protection. Not just for the evidence, but for myself. He thought he was playing a power game with a naive college graduate. But while he was playing checkers, assuming his authority could erase reality, I was playing chess. His smug victory dance in that office was premature. He'd won a battle by destroying my phone's gallery, but the war was far from over. I walked out of his office with my head low and shoulders slumped, playing the part of the defeated employee. But inside, a fire was sparking to life. I wasn't just angry anymore. I was motivated. The real question haunting me as I returned to work wasn't whether I had outsmarted him. It was whether I had the courage to use what I'd saved. That night, I lay in my studio apartment, staring at the water-stained ceiling, wrestling with impossible choices. My paycheck came from Troy. My health insurance, my rent money, my grocery budget, everything depended on keeping this job. In a competitive market, getting blacklisted by management could destroy my career before it started. But every time I closed my eyes, I saw sparks flying near fuel containers. I pictured workers dodging unstable equipment like they were in some deadly video game. The images wouldn't leave me alone, painting horrific scenarios across my eyelids: explosions, electrocutions, workers crushed under collapsed shelving. My conscience wrestled with my survival instincts, and fear kept winning round after round. I'd roll over, try to sleep, then see another flash of exposed wiring or blocked exits. The cycle repeated until dawn crept through my thin curtains. For 3 sleepless nights, this internal tug-of-war consumed me. Logic said, keep quiet, protect yourself, let someone else be the hero. But my heart knew better, until one whispered warning in the break room pushed me over the edge. Monday morning in the break room, I overheard Pete Williams talking to another worker in hushed, terrified tones. Pete was a father of 3, been at the company for 8 years, always kept his head down, and did his work without complaints. Don't speak up about anything, he whispered, glancing around nervously. They'll fire you, then blackball you with every company in the district. My cousin tried reporting safety issues at his last job, couldn't find work for 2 years. His voice cracked with genuine terror, like he was passing down a survival rule carved in stone. The other worker nodded grimly. Management has friends everywhere. Cross them once, and you're done in this industry. Better to keep quiet and stay employed than be right and be homeless. Their fear cut deeper than any threat from Troy or his supervisors. This wasn't just about workplace politics or personality conflicts. This was about a culture of silence built on systematic intimidation, where speaking truth meant economic destruction. I realized workers weren't just afraid of getting hurt on the job. They were terrified of losing their livelihoods for trying to prevent those injuries. And that silence, I decided, was going to end with me. Walking past that same flickering light fixture near the leaking pipe system later that day, I couldn't shake a vivid mental image. I pictured someone getting electrocuted, their body convulsing as electricity coursed through them while coworkers screamed helplessly. The vision was so real, I could almost smell burning flesh. My stomach churned as I imagined a family waiting for their loved one to come home from work, not knowing they were lying dead under collapsed steel shelving instead. Children wondering why Daddy was late for dinner. A wife calling his phone over and over, hearing only voicemail. That night, bile rose in my throat as I sat at my laptop. The weight of inaction felt heavier than the risk of speaking up. Every hour I delayed could be the hour someone died from preventable causes. Every shift I stayed silent was another shift I became complicit in the danger. My hands trembled as I opened my email client, the cursor blinking in the empty message field like a heartbeat. The photos sat in my cloud storage, waiting to serve their purpose. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, ready to send a message that couldn't be unsent. Late on a Tuesday night, with only the hum of my refrigerator for company, I drafted the most important email of my life. Every word felt heavy with consequence, like carving truth into stone that would outlast any attempts to erase it. To the safety inspector, I began, my fingers dancing nervously across the keys. I am writing to report serious safety violations at Apex Manufacturing that pose immediate danger to workers. I kept my language professional but urgent, describing each hazard in detail without revealing my identity. I attached all 27 photos from my cloud storage, double-checking each file before hitting the attachment button. Exposed wiring near water, blocked emergency exits, unstable equipment, improperly stored hazardous materials. The evidence spoke louder than any written description could. My finger hovered over the send button, sweating despite the cool apartment air. Once I clicked, there would be no taking it back. The inspector would investigate. Questions would be asked. Troy's comfortable world of negligence would be shattered. I took a deep breath, whispered a prayer, and clicked send. The whoosh sound of the email departing felt like a gunshot in the silence. Now all I could do was wait and wonder what storm I'd unleashed. The next 5 days crawled by like years. I went to work each morning, punched my time card, and blended into the warehouse background. But inside I carried a secret that felt radioactive. Every knock on the office door made me jump. Every announcement over the intercom set my heart racing. Every time Troy looked in my direction, I wondered if he somehow knew. I became hyper-aware of every detail. The way Troy strutted across the warehouse floor with his usual arrogance, completely unaware that his world was about to implode. The casual way he ignored safety violations, stepping over exposed wires like they were sidewalk cracks. His confident laughter echoing off the warehouse walls. Other workers went about their routines, navigating around the same hazards they'd grown numb to. Pete still whispered nervously about keeping quiet. The broken equipment still leaned dangerously against walls. Nothing had changed yet, but everything felt different to me. I checked my email obsessively, looking for any response from the inspector's office. Each empty inbox felt like rejection, making me wonder if my message had disappeared into some bureaucratic void. And then, one Monday morning, everything changed when the inspectors arrived unannounced. They walked through the main entrance at exactly 8:47 a.m., clipboards in hand and official hard hats gleaming under the fluorescent lights. 3 inspectors in crisp uniforms, moving with the purposeful stride of people who knew exactly what they were looking for. Workers across the warehouse floor froze mid-task, whispers spreading like wildfire. Forklifts stopped moving. Conversations died mid-sentence. The usual industrial noise faded to an anxious hum as everyone sensed the shift in atmosphere. My pulse raced with a mixture of terror and exhilaration. This was it, the moment of truth I'd been waiting for and dreading simultaneously. I pretended to focus on my work, while watching from the corner of my eye as they spread across the facility like a search team. Troy's swagger faltered the moment he spotted them. His confident stride turned into nervous pacing as he hurried to intercept them, his face already showing the first cracks in his usual composure. Workers exchanged meaningful glances, some looking worried about potential job losses, others quietly hopeful that someone was finally taking their safety seriously. And then I saw them, my photos, printed and organized in the lead inspector's folder. When Inspector Martinez slid a printed photograph across Troy's desk during their impromptu meeting, I watched through the office window as my manager's face underwent a dramatic transformation. His cocky expression melted away like wax, replaced by genuine shock and growing panic. The photo showed the exact angle I'd captured of exposed electrical wiring snaking across wet concrete, sparks clearly visible in the image. Troy's hands trembled slightly as he picked up the print, his eyes scanning it like he was seeing a ghost. "Can you explain this hazard, Mr. Vincent?" Inspector Martinez asked, her voice carrying the authority of someone who'd seen too many preventable accidents. Her tone was professional but pointed, each word designed to extract truth. Troy's usual rehearsed confidence crumbled. His lips pressed into a thin line as he struggled to formulate a response that wouldn't incriminate him further. Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the air conditioning. For the first time since I'd started working there, he looked small, cornered like a predator, realizing the trap had sprung around him. Workers who could see into the office exchanged glances of quiet satisfaction. The power he thought he wielded absolutely was slipping away, and fast. Inspector Martinez and her team methodically questioned Troy about safety protocols, maintenance logs, and emergency procedures. Each question exposed another gap in his management, another corner cut for the sake of productivity over safety. "When was the last safety inspection of the electrical systems?" she asked, pen poised over her clipboard. Troy stammered. We do monthly walkthroughs." His voice lacked conviction, and his eyes darted toward his filing cabinet like he was mentally searching for documentation that probably didn't exist. "And these blocked emergency exits?" Inspector Rodriguez interjected, sliding another of my photos across the desk. "How long have they been obstructed?" "That's just temporary storage," Troy replied weakly, but his voice cracked on the word temporary. Everyone in the room knew those boxes had been there for months. Every answer dug him deeper into a hole of his own making. His usual smooth-talking ability had abandoned him completely. Sweat dripped onto the polished surface of his desk as he realized how many regulations he'd violated. The man who'd mocked me for caring about worker safety now looked like he might cry under the pressure of professional scrutiny. Word of his public humiliation spread faster than he could possibly contain it. By lunch break, whispers ran through the warehouse like electricity through copper wire. They found photos. The boss is in deep trouble. Someone finally reported the hazards. Workers clustered in small groups, their voices mixing excitement with nervousness. Some employees looked genuinely worried about potential layoffs or facility closure. Others seemed quietly relieved that someone had finally acknowledged the daily dangers they faced. The mood was tense but charged with possibility. Pete Williams, the same man who'd warned about staying silent, now spoke openly about safety concerns he'd been harboring for years. "Maybe things will finally change around here," he said during break, his voice carrying hope I hadn't heard before. The balance of power in the warehouse had shifted dramatically in just a few hours. Workers who'd spent years tiptoeing around management suddenly felt permission to voice their concerns. Fear was changing sides. It wasn't the employees who were trembling anymore. It was Troy who kept glancing nervously at the inspectors as they continued their methodical documentation of violations. For the first time since starting this job, I felt like the workers might actually be safer tomorrow than they were today. And punishment for the negligence was only beginning. By afternoon, the inspectors were posting official notices across the warehouse walls. Bright red violation stickers appeared on electrical panels, heavy machinery, and blocked emergency routes. Yellow caution tape cordoned off the most dangerous areas, forcing immediate shutdowns of unsafe work zones. Workers gathered around the posted notices, reading fines that made their eyes widen. Immediate correction required. Operations suspended until compliance. Mandatory safety retraining for all supervisory staff. The language was bureaucratic, but the message was crystal clear. Business as usual was over. Troy stood off to the side, jaw clenched in barely controlled fury, watching his comfortable world of cutting corners crumble in broad daylight. His authority, built on intimidation and willful ignorance, evaporated under the harsh light of official scrutiny. The empire of silence he'd constructed through threats and fear was collapsing with the sound of administrative stamps and clipboard signatures. Workers who'd spent years accepting dangerous conditions as normal now saw them properly labeled as violations worthy of substantial fines. I realized something profound as I watched the transformation unfold. I wasn't just an anonymous whistleblower anymore. I was untouchable, protected by the very system Troy had taught me to fear. That night, I wrestled with unexpected guilt as I sat in my apartment, takeout growing cold on my coffee table. Had I gone too far by reporting my own boss? Had I potentially ruined the lives of supervisors who might have families depending on their income? The questions gnawed at me as I replayed the day's events. Troy's shocked expression when he saw the photos. The nervous energy of workers unsure whether the changes would help or hurt them. The possibility that some people might lose their jobs because of my decision to speak up. But then, I remembered the spark I'd seen jumping from that grinding machine toward fuel barrels. I pictured workers having to climb over boxes to reach emergency exits during a fire. I thought about Pete's cousin, blacklisted for trying to prevent accidents just like these. My guilt slowly melted into clarity as I realized the truth. I hadn't destroyed anyone's life by reporting safety violations. I'd potentially saved multiple lives by ensuring those violations were addressed before they became tragedies. The real question wasn't whether I'd gone too far. It was whether I'd acted soon enough. The change in workplace atmosphere over the following week was remarkable. Coworkers who'd spent years whispering about hazards in corners now spoke openly about safety concerns during team meetings. They organized to clear emergency exits, reported equipment problems immediately, and demanded proper protective gear. The culture of fear that had dominated the warehouse for years began evaporating like morning fog. Workers stopped stepping carefully around dangerous equipment and started insisting it be properly secured. They refused to work near exposed electrical without proper safety measures. I watched Pete Williams confidently approach a supervisor about a loose handrail instead of just avoiding it. Other employees started using the suggestion box that had sat empty for months, filling it with legitimate safety recommendations. In their eyes, I could see something that hadn't been there before. Hope. Hope that their concerns mattered, that their safety was valued, that speaking up wouldn't automatically result in retaliation or job loss. They didn't know it was me who'd sent those photos to the inspector. They didn't need to know. What mattered was that someone had cared enough to risk their own position for their well-being. The only person left completely in the dark was the man who was losing everything because of it. Corporate headquarters sent a team of auditors the following Monday, armed with laptops and boxes of documentation requests. They dug into maintenance records, safety training logs, and incident reports going back 5 years. What they discovered painted an even worse picture than my photos had revealed. The audit uncovered a pattern of ignored safety reports, delayed maintenance requests, and systematic cover-ups of near-miss incidents. Troy had been signing off on safety inspections that were never actually performed. Equipment maintenance logs showed fabricated dates and forged signatures. Every new discovery pulled him deeper into the hole he'd dug through years of negligent management. His attempts to deflect blame onto individual workers fell apart when the paper trail clearly showed administrative failures. The auditor's questions became increasingly pointed as the scope of his negligence became clear. Workers watched through the office windows as boxes of evidence were photographed and cataloged. Some looked satisfied seeing accountability finally enforced. Others seemed amazed that their workplace had been so systematically mismanaged for so long. The whispers hinted that Troy might face consequences beyond just workplace discipline. His professional license was under review, and potential criminal negligence charges were being discussed. Word of the investigation spread beyond our facility into the broader manufacturing community. Industry contacts started reaching out to coworkers, asking about the safety scandal at Apex. Local news stations called requesting interviews about workplace conditions. Troy's professional reputation was being dragged through the mud in trade publications and industry forums. Suppliers who'd worked with him for years started expressing concerns about liability. Contractors began adding safety inspection clauses to their agreements, specifically because of incidents at our facility. He'd once strutted through the warehouse with unchecked arrogance, treating safety regulations like optional suggestions. Now he couldn't walk across the floor without feeling dozens of eyes burning into him, measuring his every move against the violations he'd ignored. His LinkedIn profile, which used to boast about efficient operations and streamlined processes, now looked like evidence of corner-cutting and negligence. Professional contacts stopped returning his calls. Conference invitations were quietly withdrawn. The man who'd mocked me for caring about a few scratches and wires was learning that reputation destruction could be far more devastating than any single workplace confrontation. And I remained silent, invisible, watching his world crumble from the anonymous safety of the crowd. 3 weeks after the initial inspection, corporate headquarters delivered their official verdict. Troy faced substantial personal fines, mandatory safety retraining, and a formal reprimand that would follow him throughout his career. He wasn't fired immediately, but everyone understood he was hanging by the thinnest possible thread. The aura of invincibility that had protected him for years was completely gone. Supervisors who used to laugh at his jokes now kept their distance, worried about being associated with his negligence. Workers who'd once feared his authority now saw him as a liability to their own safety. He moved through the warehouse like a ghost of his former self, his confident swagger replaced by paranoid glances and defensive posture. Every interaction felt forced, every decision second-guessed by people who no longer trusted his judgment. The company installed new safety protocols specifically designed to prevent the kind of systematic negligence Troy had practiced. Regular inspections, mandatory reporting systems, and worker protection policies that couldn't be ignored or circumvented. His legacy wasn't the efficient operation he'd imagined, but rather a cautionary tale about the price of putting productivity over people. I wasn't done watching his fall from grace. 2 months later, the warehouse felt like a completely different place. New safety officers conducted weekly inspections, emergency exits stayed clear, and equipment received proper maintenance on schedule. The changes weren't just cosmetic. They represented a fundamental shift in how the company valued worker safety. Employees attended mandatory safety training sessions that actually meant something, instead of the rubber stamp exercises Troy used to oversee. Suggestion boxes overflowed with legitimate safety recommendations that were seriously considered and often implemented. The culture of silence had been replaced by open communication about hazards and concerns. Workers felt empowered to stop unsafe operations without fear of retaliation. Incident reporting increased dramatically, but actual accidents decreased as problems were addressed before they became dangerous. Pete Williams was promoted to a safety liaison position, giving him official authority to investigate and address worker concerns. Other employees who'd been quietly competent for years suddenly found opportunities for advancement in the new safety-focused environment. The man who'd tried to bury my evidence and silence my voice was now buried under the weight of his own failures. His attempts to maintain control had backfired spectacularly, creating the very changes he'd fought against. I walked through the warehouse one morning, my head held higher than it had been in months. The transformation around me felt personal, like I'd played a small but crucial role in making dozens of people safer at work. I wasn't just the naive rookie anymore, who could be intimidated into silence. I had faced down corporate intimidation, public humiliation, and threats to my career security. I had risked everything for the principle that worker safety mattered more than management convenience. And I had won, not through confrontation or drama, but through quiet courage and careful documentation. My growth wasn't visible to anyone else, but I felt it in every step. The confidence that came from knowing I'd done the right thing, despite the personal cost. The strength that developed from standing up to authority when it was wrong. Workers around me went about their duties in a safer environment, most of them unaware of the role my photos had played in creating these changes. They didn't need to know. Their safety was acknowledgement enough. The quiet strength I discovered within myself was mine alone, invisible but absolutely unshakable. And I knew Troy could never take it away from me. I caught a glimpse of Troy one afternoon as he cleaned out his desk. The corporate decision finally made to remove him from his position. His shoulders slumped with defeat, his eyes hollow and haunted by the complete destruction of his professional reputation. The investigation had revealed additional violations in previous positions, creating a pattern that made him unemployable in any supervisory safety role. Professional contacts had distanced themselves, references had dried up, and his career in manufacturing management was effectively over. He looked older than his years, worn down by months of scrutiny, legal consultations, and professional disgrace. The confident, sneering manager who deleted my photos in front of witnesses was gone, replaced by a broken man who'd learned too late that actions have consequences. As he walked toward the exit carrying a small cardboard box of personal items, several workers watched silently. There was no celebration, no cheering, just the quiet satisfaction of seeing accountability finally enforced. He paused at the door, looking back one last time at the warehouse he'd mismanaged into dangerous disrepair. I wondered if he was thinking about all the lives he'd carelessly endangered or just mourning his own downfall. He never knew who had planted the seed that destroyed him. He thought he buried the photos when he deleted them from my phone that humiliating afternoon in his office. He thought he buried me when he mocked my concerns in front of his supervisors, dismissing my character along with my evidence. He believed his authority was absolute, that intimidation could erase reality. But truth has deeper roots than any attempt to suppress it. While he was playing power games with a rookie employee, I was quietly planting evidence in digital soil he couldn't reach. My photos grew into an investigation that sprouted into corporate accountability, blooming into real change that protected real lives. When that truth finally surfaced through an inspector's official visit, it didn't destroy me as he'd intended. It destroyed him instead, completely and permanently. His career, his reputation, and his legacy became cautionary tales about the price of negligence. I learned something profound from this experience that I'll carry forever. Silence in the face of danger isn't just cowardice, it's complicity. But courage, even quiet courage from an anonymous source, can be louder than any amount of bluster or intimidation. The warehouse is safer now. Workers speak up without fear. And I know that sometimes the smallest voice, properly amplified, can topple the biggest bully.